And I'm cueing the music. All right there. Hey, data lovers, and welcome to another episode of I Love Data Fridays here at the International Data Evaluation Center on the campuses of the Ohio State University. And ladies and gentlemen, today we have a special edition of I Love Data Fridays. We are going to be talking about the reading recovery follow-up study with researchers from the Center for Research in Education and Social Policy, and specifically we will be talking about Cohort 6 data collection. But hey, who's talking data to you today? Well, you've got me, Jeff Breimer-Bashore, Director and Co-Principal Investigator here at the International Data Evaluation Center. And I am joined by Dr. Henry May and Allie Blakeney. You guys want to say hi real quick?
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
All right, good. All right, so now let me flip screens here to our agenda. So we will be talking about our data collection procedures and learning a little bit about the follow-up study for our Cohort 6. I know on my screen it says Cohort 4. That is a typo. That should be a 6. That will take just under 30 minutes to get through all of that information. There will be a Q&A session at the end, and you can type questions even as we're going along with the event over at www.slido.com, and you just enter that event code there, X171, and the questions will appear on the screen to us, and we will try to answer them for you. So now, let's talk a little data. I am going to turn it over to Henry and Allie. And let me give 1 second here to get your slides up on the screen. All right, I am ready to go.
All right, thanks, Jeff. So hi, everybody. This is Henry May from the University of Delaware. And I'm sure that many of you have heard me talk about the reading recovery study before. This is not new to many of you, most of which have participated in prior rounds of data collection. And I'm happy to say this is our last round of data collection for the follow-up study. And so Allie and I are going to give a brief overview, basically describing how we've gotten to this point and what's going to happen this fall, and how things are a little bit different this time around. So a little background. The vast majority of you are aware that there was an I3 funded study in which reading recovery was given a grant for $55 million back in 2010 to scale up across the nation. And as part of that, I and other researchers collaborated with the university training centers and districts across the country to implement a couple of research designs to better understand and produce rigorous evidence of the impacts of reading recovery. And the results from that study show that reading recovery does have large short-term effects on kids' reading proficiency, and we're hoping to bolster those results by collecting evidence now of the long-term effects of reading recovery. So basically that means that the kids that were part of the I3 study way back when, those kids were followed into 3rd and 4th grade, and we're now looking at a cohort of kids that was not part of the original I3 study, but was in 1st grade back in the 2016-17 school year and just completed 3rd grade this past year. And the hope is that we're going to be able to have an easier time collecting their test scores since they've just taken that state test this past spring. So the data collection for this fall, as I said, it's the final round, and we're focused on kids who participated in reading recovery, as well as tested not instructed kids from the TNI schools from 2016-17. So, and the schools that are eligible are those that had at least 7 reading recovery kids and at least 4 tested not instructed students in that school year. Who's going to be responsible for collecting these data? It's going to be either the reading recovery teacher leader or a reading recovery teacher who is designated by that teacher leader. And those who do the data collection for any given school are going to get a $75 gift card. So that gift card can go to a teacher leader if he or she is collecting and submitting the data for a school, or to a reading recovery teacher that teacher leader nominates. For each school, so there are some teacher leaders that have done multiple schools, and those teacher leaders actually are eligible to get more than one $75 gift card. So when will these data be collected? Well, today we're doing a pre-survey informational webinar. The pre-survey is going to open on Monday, and this is the survey in which we ask teacher leaders to provide the contact info for the people who will be responsible for collecting and submitting the data for each school. Then that will be followed by another informational webinar that is geared toward the folks that are going to be submitting those data, and the data collection window for submitting students' test scores and completing the school survey. That window goes from November 4th to December 13th. The hope is that most folks are going to have their data input prior to Thanksgiving, and we'll be able to distribute gift cards actually before the Thanksgiving break. That way you guys will have them for Black Friday and Cyber Monday. All right, I am going to turn over the presentation to Allie, who's going to talk about the nuts and bolts of the data collection activities.
Hello, so this is Allie, and so our data collection is broken down into 3 main parts. The first part being the pre-survey, which I'll be going over today, and which will be opening on Monday, as Henry stated. And then after we have our pre-survey data, then we'll open up submission for standardized test score data. That's via IDEC, which Jeff will talk about a bit later in the presentation. And then we have our full student and school survey. So for the pre-survey, each teacher leader will receive an email from us with a pre-survey link asking them to identify an individual who has agreed to complete the survey and collect test data for each school. And it will include a full list of students for which data will be collected from each school. So here's just a screenshot of the very first thing you will see when you open up the link. It will give you some basic information on what we're doing, how to fill out the pre-survey, and of important note, you cannot submit the pre-survey unless all data fields are filled in. So if you have a school that is not going to be able to participate for whatever reason, put in NA for both the first and last name, and then the email address will be na@nowhere.edu. So here's an example of how school 1 would appear. As we can see, we have Disney with quite a few characters involved, and then folks would, there it goes. So we would require that you fill in these three fields for school 1. In this case, we have 2 schools, so each of these would have to be filled in. No teacher leader is going to receive an email with more than 7 schools, and it's just going to depend how many schools have been selected for this cohort. So it can be anywhere from 1 to 7 schools.
So what goes in the first name, last name, and email address field is the contact info of the teacher or the teacher leader that's going to be submitting data for that school.
Yes, and whoever's name is inputted here will be getting the survey link on November 4th. So please double check the email address entry, because if there's a typo or anything, we're going to have to get back in touch with you if an email returns undeliverable. After you submit, you'll see our little thank you screen. And I should note that once you're here, the survey is done. You cannot go back through and resubmit the pre-survey, but if there are changes, you can contact us at this pressrr@udel.edu email address, and I can work on the back end to help you with that. Okay, so then after we get through the pre-survey window, we're going to be requesting test score data. And this helps us with 2 big research questions, including what are the long-term impacts of reading recovery. Like Henry mentioned, we're looking at long-term, not necessarily short-term, to build the case for how reading recovery is a validated instrument to help students throughout their elementary career. And then it also helps us answer how much school level variability there is in long-term impacts of reading recovery. So what test score data will be collected? Because this cohort is for students who were in first grade in 2016-17, we are only looking for their third grade test score data. So that would be their test score data from this last spring, this most recent academic year of testing. So that would be third grade scores from academic year 18-19. And when you go to input this data, we need the name of the test that the student took. If there is missing data, please report why. And then the score of the reading and or ELA for the student. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jeff, who's going to explain how the IDEC website works for test score submission.
All right, thank you, Allie. Before I show the website itself, I'm briefly just gonna go over the directions. So as Allie said, that you will be submitting the test data for your students using the IDEC website. The data can be entered by either teacher leader or teacher, with one caveat that if a teacher is no longer part of reading recovery, the data then has to be entered by a teacher, even if you have a brand new teacher that's in that school. It's just how our system works, and we can't change that. And we'll show you how to do that. Once the data is entered by you or a teacher, all you have to do is click the Save button. There's no need to click the Submit button. I know teacher leaders, you're used to doing the check and submit and approve process. We don't have to do it with this data. We just need you to click the Save button, and that'll put it in the database. So we're going to go ahead. I'm going to bring over a copy of the website here. And let me make that full screen. So here we go. Here's the website, and we have our list of students. So to enter the data, we're going to go over to the left-hand side of the screen, and we're going to select 2016-17 from the school year drop-down box. This will cause the page to refresh, and you should get your list of students. Teacher leaders, if you need to, you can come over to the filter options and filter for specific schools. So you can only just look at one school of students at a time. So you'll notice that there are two columns on this page. There is a follow-up and the U of Delaware follow-up. So this leftmost follow-up page is the IDEC generic data follow-up page. So your teachers will not enter data on this page. They will enter it in the rightmost column under one that says the U of Delaware follow-up. So just to repeat that, they will not enter it under the follow-up, the generic follow-up, this leftmost column. They will enter it under the rightmost column, the U of Delaware follow-up. To get there, all you have to do is teachers and teacher leaders, you just click on the data entry page icon, and this will bring up our questions. You will see 4 questions on the screen. The first one simply asks, what was the name of the assessment? And you can see that we have several listed here. Just select one, and then you can go immediately to question number 3, which is entering the student's scale score on that assessment. If the assessment is not listed, there is an other option near the end of the list. You can select that, type in the name of the assessment, and then you can enter the scale score as well. If the child didn't take an assessment, or you can't locate the child to get their assessment, or you can't locate the child's data, you can select none, and then it's just going to require an answer for number 4 about why the student's score was missing. It just needs to be a brief answer. We don't need a lot of information, so you can say things just like the student moved, and that will be fine. Teacher leaders, just so you know, if you're entering the data, the first thing you'll actually have to do before you enter the enter the data on the screen is click that acquire button, so the record becomes under your control, and then you'll be able to enter the data and click the save button. Otherwise, teachers will see a save button on the screen, and they'll just be able to click save, and save it right into the database. All right, I'm going to move that back out of the way. Allie, do I have more slides or is that it for me?
That is it for you, and I'm
Okay.
going to take over and talk about the full survey.
All right.
Okay, so we also wanted to include in the slide deck screenshots of what you'll be asked to include for the full student survey. Hopefully that'll help when you're trying to decide who should be filling it out, if it's going to be a teacher leader or a delegate. You'll be able to see what types of information and types of questions we're going to be asking. So the purpose of this full survey is to look at the variability and the persistence of impacts and see if it's at school level or student level, and what performance monitoring and or interventions did students experience from first through third grades. So what data will be collected? So it's broken down into two general categories. We're looking at school characteristics, and then we're looking at student characteristics, in particular, what type of literacy interventions and their progress from first to third grade. So something to highlight, for those who have participated in our surveys in the past, we have asked for third and fourth grade data. Again, because this is the most recent cohort of students, we are only asking for third grade data. And our hope is that because it's relatively recent, that it'll be a bit easier for you to find data on the student or students.
First to fifth grade.
First.
Yeah.
So when you get your survey link via email for whoever was designated as the survey completer, you'll be taken to this page. It's just, again, basically reiterates what I just mentioned, where it's two sections, and you'll be asked to hit continue. All of the students, along with their IDAC ID number, will be listed for your relevant elementary school. However, please note that we ask that you submit the test score data before you complete the survey. That just helps us make sure that we have all the data in. It helps you to make sure it's streamlined. So the order of events should be pre-survey, submission of test score data, and then completion of the full survey. So you'll be asked to state whether or not you submitted these standardized test scores. This has caused some confusion in the past, but these are two buttons that you can click. If you click yes, it'll turn blue. If you click no, it'll turn blue. And you will not be able to move past this page unless you state that you have submitted the standardized test score data. So for school characteristics, first we try to track down where the students attended school in the most recent school year. So this would be for academic year 18-19, when students would be in third grade if they haven't been retained. So we kind of play a game of find the student, and we ask that you identify students who are still in the same school, students that moved, and students that you can locate and not locate after they moved. And any student who cannot be located will be excluded from the rest of the survey, so you will not be asked any more questions about them. We also ask about school administrator changes and grade levels. So first, for our game of find the student, you will have all of your students listed on the left, and then three different categories. They attended the same elementary school in the past academic year. They attended a different school in the same district, or you cannot locate the student at all. You know this, and they're gone. So here we have 3, 3, and 2. Now for these three folks that we say attended a different school in the same district, you will be asked to specify whether or not you can locate them. So here we have yes for 2 of them and no for Tinkerbell. And so because we cannot locate Tinkerbell, she will be excluded from the rest of the survey. Then you'll be asked a simple binary question, whether or not the school administrator changed between the student's first and second grade year and between the second and third grade year. And then we ask that you identify the student's grade level for 2017-18 and 2018-19. So this would be the second grade year, again, if the student was not retained, and then the third grade year. So you'll have a drop-down box and you just select what grade the student was in. And we have an identical box over here, only it includes fourth grade as well in case the student skipped a grade. So for their interventions and their progress, we asked for second and third grades whether or not they had an IEP, whether or not they were continuously monitored for reading difficulties, and what literacy interventions they may have received during those school years. So for the IEP, please note that we only want you to say yes if it was with a reading designation specifically. And again, we have simple binary questions for what would be their second grade year and their third grade year. Identical question structure and format for continuous monitoring for reading problems. And then for each student, you will receive an individual question like this it's pre-populated with about 44 or 45 of the most common reading interventions for those school grades. So if you're on the list and you see anything that they received in either second or third grade, just go ahead and click it. You're allowed to click as many options as are applicable. If they didn't receive anything, please select none for the relevant years where they didn't receive anything. That way we know that that they truly didn't receive anything, not that we aren't unsure whether they got something. And we also have 3 blank options here where you can input additional interventions if you don't see it on the list.
So this is really, really important data for the purposes of understanding how and when the long-term effects of reading recovery are sustained and how the experiences of those students are different from our comparison group of students. So you can imagine the large effects of reading recovery in first grade, those may be sustained from first to third grade, and there's no additional intervention necessary during second and third grade. But at the same time, you could imagine that the kids who are in the comparison condition and actually weren't selected for reading recovery when they were in first grade, they might actually get intervention in second and third grade, and they could catch up to the reading recovery kids. So we want to be able to distinguish between the sustaining effects of reading recovery and also to what degree our comparison group might have actually caught up to the reading recovery kids. Bottom line is that this data is going to allow us to understand better how the effects are sustained over time, but also to understand the relative costs of reading recovery. When you think about it, a lot of folks complain that reading recovery is an expensive intervention, but if it means that a little bit more expense is invested in first grade, and you don't have to spend so much on intervention in second and third grade, then reading recovery may more than pay for itself. It's more expensive up front, but it's perhaps cheaper in the long run. And if we can show that reading recovery kids require less intervention in second and third grade, and the comparison students may actually experience interventions in second and third grade that altogether exceed the cost of reading recovery in first grade, that would go a long way to quelling the criticisms of folks that believe that reading recovery is too expensive.
And so with that, after you answer these literacy intervention questions for each student that you were able to locate, you will submit the survey, and that will be it. So this is the last, these questions are the last part of the full survey. So what to look for next? As we mentioned earlier, on Monday, we'll be sending out pre-survey links for Cohort 6 via email. And it might be a good idea to start gathering the information for the standardized test score data. We realize that that's sometimes outside your control in terms of access, so it might be easier to get working on that sooner rather than later. On Wednesday, October 30th, we'll be having a webinar for the full survey. We'll be covering the screens that I just showed and reiterating the test score submission process for any designee that you may have given a survey to and who's not included on this call. And you get super extra bonus points for dressing up behind your desks, even if we can't see you. And then that following Monday, we will launch the full survey. So on November 4th. And again, our anticipated deadline is December 13th. But submission before the Thanksgiving break, we can make sure that we email you an Amazon gift card before the big shopping holidays. So if you have any more questions or want to scope us out some more, here are some resources to our studies webpage, our data collection activities, and some of our FAQs that we've collected over our cohort collection years. And if you have any other questions or concerns that aren't addressed in this webinar or that can't be found on the website, please feel free to contact us directly at crest/rr@udel.edu or the IDEC help desk, which I'm guessing most folks are highly familiar with. I know that I've become on very good terms with Julie through the course of this study, and she's also a wonderful resource, as is Jeff, as always. So Jeff, that'll do it for us. Do we have any questions online?
Not yet. We can wait 30 seconds here, and we'll see if anything rolling. So, folks, it's question time. If you want to type something in, we are watching. You can submit a question at www.slido.com, and then you put in code X171. So that's slido.com, code X171. I'm also going to check over on the YouTube channel itself in case anyone's post a question in the chat window there. I don't see anything yet. I'm trying to think of some of our usual follow-up stuff while we wait to see if anyone submits a question. Folks, I would say one thing is if your school district, teacher leaders, as you check with your school districts for permission to send us the data, if you need forms, parental permission forms, or forms, a lot of times there's been questions of like, can we actually do this? Be assured that FERPA regulations do allow for the submission of data for purposes of research, and that's what this is. This falls under the category of research, so all is good there. If you do need a data sharing agreement with either us or CREST, we can do data sharing agreements as well and get those approved as quickly as we can. Allie, anything else that I might have forgotten?
No, I think that was one of our most common questions, and we do include the actual regulation. We cite it in the email that we send out in both the pre-survey and the full survey welcoming link.
Gotcha.
So that way you're welcome to forward that on. And we also have that regulation listed on our FAQ section of the website in case any administrators are questioning or wondering where that comes from.
Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any questions here, though I'm sure some will roll in via email later. So should we wrap it up?
Sounds like a plan.
All right. Well, Allie and Henry, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, let me get slides changed over here and let me cue the outro music. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching this special episode of I Love Data Fridays, our coverage of the Reading Recovery follow-up study. And hey, we will talk data to you later.